Welcome back to Talking Papers Faceless Podcast. I'm Shaquille.
And I'm Aksa.
Glad to have you all back with us for another deep dive into some fascinating research. And remember, we're here every Monday and Thursday, so hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss an episode.
And if you enjoy these deep dives, don't forget to give this episode a like and leave us a comment, especially if you have a topic you think we should check out.
So today we're going to be taking a look at a scientific paper that explores a topic that you might not expect: the crucial role of metals in human health.
Yeah, we tend to think of metals as something industrial, like bridges and buildings, but they're actually essential for life.
I know, right? It's pretty wild to think that something like iron, which we associate with, construction, is also what allows our blood to carry oxygen.
And it's not just iron either. We're talking about a whole bunch of different metallic characters here. Like you've got your sodium and potassium, which are super important for our nerves to fire properly. And magnesium keeps our muscles working the way they should.
It's like our bodies have this secret society of metals all working behind the scenes.
Exactly. But here's the catch. Just like with anything else, if you have too much or too little of these metals, things can go haywire.
Right. It's all about finding that sweet spot. So what happens if we don't get enough of these essential metals?
Well, that's when we start seeing all sorts of health issues. For example, iron deficiency leads to anemia, which makes us feel tired and weak because our cells aren't getting enough oxygen.
And it's not just iron. A lack of cobalt, which is part of vitamin B12, can also contribute to anemia.
Oh, and don't forget about copper. A copper deficiency can cause all sorts of problems, like issues with your brain, your heart, and even anemia too. Copper is involved in tons of enzymatic reactions, so if you're missing it, the effects are felt all over your body.
Wow, it sounds like each of these metals has its own special job to do in keeping us healthy.
Mm.
What about zinc? I know that's important for our immune system.
Absolutely. Zinc is crucial for a healthy immune system, and without enough, you might see growth retardation and changes in your skin, particularly in kids.
It's amazing how these small amounts of metals can have such a big impact on our health.
Oh, for sure. Like, calcium is crucial for strong bones. If you're deficient in calcium over time, your bones can start to deteriorate.
That makes sense. And what about chromium? I know that's got something to do with blood sugar, right?
You got it. Chromium is really important for regulating your blood sugar levels. And without enough of it, your body might not process glucose as effectively as it should, which could be a sign of more serious metabolic problems down the road.
It's crazy to think that we're just starting to understand how important these metals really are.
I know, right? It's like we're just scratching the surface. There's still so much more to discover.
If you're finding this as fascinating as we are, don't forget to like this episode and leave a comment below. Let us know what you think.
And if you have any questions about metals and human health, drop those in the comments too.
So we've talked about how important it is to have the right amount of these essential metals in our bodies. But what happens if we get too much of a good thing?
Well, that's where things can get a bit tricky. Even essential metals can become harmful if we have too much of them in our systems.
It's like the old saying, too much of anything can be bad. Just like drinking too much water can be harmful.
Exactly. Our bodies have these awesome systems to regulate metal levels, but sometimes they can get overloaded.
And that's when we run into problems. But here's the cool part. Scientists have figured out how to use these metals to create some incredibly effective medicine.
Oh, yeah. Now we're getting to the really exciting stuff. These treatments are fighting cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, and so much more.
It's like metals are becoming secret weapons in the fight against disease.
Let's start with one of the most famous examples, platinum complexes in cancer treatment. Have you ever heard of cisplatin?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common chemotherapy drug, right?
It is. And it's been revolutionary in treating all kinds of cancers, from testicular and ovarian cancer to lung and bladder cancers.
That's an impressive track record. So how does it work? What makes it able to fight cancer?
Cisplatin binds to the DNA in cancer cells and stops them from replicating. It's like throwing a wrench in the machinery, preventing those cancer cells from multiplying out of control.
That's pretty ingenious. But I imagine there's some downsides, right? I mean, chemotherapy is known for having some rough side effects.
Unfortunately, you're right. Cisplatin can cause nausea, vomiting, hair loss, and even kidney damage.
Sounds like a powerful tool, but it comes with a cost. So it's effective, but not without its challenges.
Exactly. Which is why researchers are always on the lookout for new platinum-based drugs that might be less toxic or better at targeting specific cancers.
So what are some of the other platinum-based options that scientists have come up with?
Well, there's carboplatin, which was designed to reduce some of those harsh side effects of cisplatin, particularly kidney damage. The downside is it's not always more effective at treating the cancer itself.
It's a trade-off then. Scientists are always trying to find that perfect balance between being effective and minimizing the negative impacts on the body.
It's the constant challenge of drug development, trying to find that sweet spot. Then you have oxaliplatin, which has been approved for colorectal cancer and is showing some real promise in overcoming drug resistance, which is a major hurdle in cancer treatment.
That's a huge step forward. Sounds like researchers are making real progress. Are there any other platinum-based drugs we should be watching out for?
There's one called satraplatin that's being studied for its potential in treating advanced prostate cancer. It just shows you how the search for new and improved treatments is always ongoing.
It's amazing how they're finding ways to harness the power of metals to fight disease. And it's not just platinum either, right? What other metals are being explored for medical use?
There's a whole world of metal-based medicines beyond platinum that researchers are really diving into.
I'm all ears. Tell me more about these other metallic heroes in the fight against disease.
One example is titanium complexes. Researchers are studying compounds like titanosine and butadiene, and they've shown some really encouraging results in cancer treatment research.
Titanium,
Yeah.
really? That's usually associated with being strong and durable, not treating cancer.
Exactly. That's what makes it so interesting. Then there are ruthenium complexes like NAMIA and KP1019. These compounds have actually made it to clinical trials because of their unique anti-cancer properties.
It's incredible to think that these metals we normally think of as being used for construction or manufacturing could actually be used to save lives.
And don't forget about an old friend, bismuth subsalicylate, better known as Pepto-Bismol.
Wait, Pepto-Bismol contains metal.
It does. It contains bismuth. It's a perfect example of how metal-based medicines can be used for a wide range of conditions, not just serious diseases.
I had no idea. So it's not just for upset stomachs.
Well, that's what it's most known for, but it shows how versatile bismuth can be in medicine. Speaking of versatility, there are also gold complexes. For instance, auranofin is a gold-containing drug that's still used to treat rheumatoid arthritis.
You're kidding. Gold isn't just for jewelry anymore.
Yeah. Nope. And it's interesting to note that another gold complex, orothioglucose, was used to treat rheumatoid arthritis for over 70 years, but was recently discontinued in the U.S., leaving auranofin as the only gold-based treatment option.
That's a good reminder that medicine is constantly evolving. New discoveries are made, and sometimes older treatments become outdated. It's all about finding what works best and is safest for patients.
You said it. Research is always moving forward, which is a good thing because it means we're always learning and improving.
This has been an amazing journey so far, learning about all these different metals and how they can be both the heroes and villains in the story of human health.
I agree. And we're just getting started.
Before we go any further, let's remind our listeners to subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, and leave us a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions.
We really appreciate you all being here. Your engagement helps us shape future episodes.
Okay, so we've established that metals are essential for life, potentially toxic in excess and even being harnessed to create life-saving drugs. But I'm curious, how do these metals even get into our bodies in the first place?
That's a great question, and it leads us perfectly into our next chapter, the sources of metals in our diet and environment. Now, before we went to the break, we were talking about scientists using metals to create medicines.
Yeah, some incredible medicines.
But what's even crazier is how metals are totally essential for the way our cells actually function.
We talked about iron carrying oxygen, but it sounds like there's a lot more to it.
Way more to it. A lot of the proteins in our bodies, like the ones that help digest food or repair tissues, they need metals to work properly.
So it's not just about, carrying oxygen or building bones.
Not even close. We're talking about metals being key parts of enzymes. You can think of enzymes like these tiny little machines in our cells that speed up biochemical reactions.
Okay, I get it. So without the right metals, these little factories in our cells can't really run.
Basically, yeah. And research shows that something like half of all proteins actually need metals to function correctly.
Wow, that's a lot. So what are these metals actually doing in the enzymes?
Well, remember how we said that metals have positive charges?
Like how iron can be F2 plus or F3 plus?
Yeah, exactly. Those positive charges make metal ions act as what we call electrophiles, basically, meaning they love to attract negatively charged molecules. And that's super important for enzymes because it lets them bind to and arrange the molecules they're working on, which are called substrates.
So the metals are kind of like little magnets holding stuff in place for the enzyme.
That's a great way to think about it. It's all about creating the perfect little workspace for the enzyme. But wait, there's more. Metals are also really good at activating water molecules.
Activating water. What does that even mean? I thought water was already pretty active.
Well, in this case, activating means making the water molecules more reactive, like more ready to take part in chemical reactions.
Hmm.
And metal ions can actually interact with water molecules, making them more powerful in these biochemical processes.
I guess we really have underestimated metals. They're like the unsung heroes of our cells.
Totally. And when it comes to these enzyme superstars, zinc is a real rock star. It's got all these unique qualities that make it super adaptable.
Okay, tell me more. What makes zinc so special?
One thing is that zinc has what we call borderline hardness. It's not too hard, not too soft, which means it can interact with all sorts of different atoms like nitrogen, oxygen, and sulfur, which are super common in biological molecules. This lets zinc bind really strongly to proteins.
So zinc is like the social butterfly of the metal world, making friends with everyone.
Yeah, you could say that. Another thing that makes zinc so great is its stability. It doesn't easily get oxidized or reduced, meaning it won't mess up the delicate redox reactions happening inside cells.
Okay, so zinc is stable and adaptable. What else?
Zinc also likes to have a tetrahedral coordination in enzymes. It's like a pyramid shape. And this actually helps zinc attract electrons and make those water molecules even more reactive, which is crucial for a lot of enzymatic reactions.
So zinc is controlling electrons in water molecules. Now I'm impressed. Is there anything else?
One last thing. Zinc's electron configuration makes it immune to what we call ligand field stabilization effects. Basically, this means that how zinc binds to things is only determined by the size and charge of the molecules it interacts with.
So it just goes with the flow binding based on the vibe of its partners.
Exactly. And if that wasn't enough, zinc is also awesome at keeping certain negatively charged ions reactive even when they're bound to it. This means those ions can still participate in reactions even when they're hanging out with zinc.
Wow, zinc really is a multitasker.
Yeah.
Are there any examples of these zinc-containing enzymes where we can see all this in action?
Absolutely. There's a whole group of enzymes called matrix metalloproteinases, or MMPs, that are a perfect example of zinc in action.
MMPs, I've never heard of them. What do they do?
MMPs are basically responsible for breaking down proteins. They're like the demolition crews of our cells, taking care of things like wound healing, tissue remodeling, and even embryonic development.
So they're the cleanup crew, getting rid of old proteins to make room for new ones.
You got it. And zinc is a crucial part of this process because it helps MMPs break those strong chemical bonds called the amide bonds that hold proteins together.
Now I'm seeing how zinc is involved in some pretty important stuff. How does it actually help with this protein breakdown?
Let's break it down step by step. Inside an MMP, the zinc ion is usually bound to 3 amino acid residues from the enzyme itself and 1 water molecule.
So zinc is in the middle with 4 things around it, 3 from the enzyme and 1 water molecule.
Exactly. The 3 amino acids are usually histidine glutamate or aspartate. Now, the water molecule that's bound to zinc is also hydrogen bonded to a nearby glutamate residue.
So we've got a little network here with zinc, water, and glutamate all connected.
And that connection is key. It's what activates the water molecule, getting it ready to do its job.
So zinc and glutamate are like a tag team prepping the water molecule for action.
You got it. This activated water molecule is now perfectly positioned to attack the amide bond in the protein that needs to be broken down.
It's like a tiny little battle happening inside the cell.
Kind of. The oxygen atom from the water molecule launches what we call a nucleophilic attack on the carbon atom of the amide bond.
So the water molecule is offering to share its electrons with the carbon in the amide bond.
Exactly. As this happens, a proton from the water gets transferred to the nitrogen atom of the amide bond. At the same time, the oxygen atom from the water forms a bond with the zinc ion.
So there's a lot of rearranging going on.
It's like a perfectly choreographed dance. This creates a temporary unstable molecule where the carbon atom from the amide bond is now connected to both the nitrogen and the oxygen.
So the amide bond is starting to weaken.
Right. And to make it even more unstable, a proton from that glutamate residue we talked about earlier gets transferred to the nitrogen atom of the amide bond.
So glutamate is helping out making the nitrogen want to break free.
Exactly. With that extra proton, the nitrogen becomes really unstable and wants to detach from the carbon.
And that's what finally breaks the amide bond.
Yep. The unstable molecule collapses. The amide bond breaks, and the protein is split into 2 pieces.
That's amazing. It's incredible how zinc controls this whole process. But why is it so important to break down these proteins in the first place?
Well, remember how I said that MMPs are involved in wound healing and tissue remodeling?
Yeah, they sound like they're pretty busy.
They are. Think about what happens when you get a cut. Your body needs to get rid of the damaged tissue so that new healthy tissue can grow. and MMPs are essential for that process.
So they're like the construction workers of our bodies, clearing out the debris so healing can start.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just wound healing. MMPs are also involved in things like bone development and breaking down scar tissue. They're even involved in the development of our brains.
Wow, they really are important.
Hmm.
So what happens if they don't work properly?
Well, that's when we can run into problems. For example, if MMPs are too active, they can contribute to conditions like arthritis, where they break down the cartilage in our joints.
Yeah, too much demolition can definitely cause problems.
And on the other hand, if MMPs aren't active enough, it can slow down wound healing and lead to a buildup of scar tissue.
So it's all about balance again, just like with the levels of metals in our bodies.
That's right. Maintaining the right level of MMP activity is crucial for our health. And that's where zinc comes in. By understanding how zinc controls these enzymes, scientists might be able to develop new treatments for conditions where MMPs are out of whack.
This is fascinating. It sounds like we're on the verge of some pretty big medical breakthroughs.
I think so too. The more we learn about how metals work in our bodies, the more possibilities open up for creating new and better therapies.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. I can't believe how much we've learned about these elements that we usually don't even think about.
Me too. And we're not finished yet.
Yeah.
There's still a lot more to uncover.
Before we move on, though, let's remind our listeners to subscribe to our channel. Hit that like button and leave us a comment below. We love hearing your thoughts and questions.
Your engagement really means a lot to us. It helps us make the show even better.
All right, so we've talked about how metals are essential for life, how they can be good or bad, and how scientists are using them to create amazing drugs. But I'm curious, how do these metals actually get into our bodies to begin with?
That's a great question, and it leads us to our next topic, the world of metals in our diet and environment.
So before the break, we were talking about how these essential metals get into our bodies.
Right, we were talking about how it's not just about getting enough of good metals, but also limiting our exposure to the harmful ones.
Exactly. So where do we encounter these metals, both the good and the bad, in our everyday lives?
Well, as we touched on before, the main ways metals get into our bodies are through our diet and the environment.
Okay, so let's start with diet. What are some of the best food sources for these essential metals?
When it comes to iron, red meat, poultry, fish, and beans are all great sources. Leafy green vegetables like spinach are good too, but the iron in plants isn't absorbed as easily.
So if you're vegetarian or vegan, you might need to pay extra attention to your iron intake.
Yeah, you might need to consider iron supplements or make sure you're eating iron-rich plant-based foods, along with things high in vitamin C, which helps with iron absorption. As for zinc, oysters are actually the best source, but you can also find it in red meat, poultry nuts, and whole grains.
I'm always trying to get enough magnesium. What are some good sources for that?
Leafy greens, almonds, avocado, and even dark chocolate are all good sources of magnesium. And for calcium dairy products like milk, cheese, and yogurt are the classics.
But there are options for people who don't eat dairy, right?
Absolutely. You can get calcium from fortified plant-based milk and foods like tofu and some leafy greens.
So it really comes down to having a balanced diet with a variety of foods to make sure you're getting enough of these essential metals.
Exactly. Variety is key. Now let's talk about the environment because that plays a big role too. Remember, not all metals are good for us. Some, like lead and mercury, can be really harmful.
Yeah, we've all heard about the dangers of lead poisoning, especially for kids.
Lead can be found in old paint-contaminated soil and even some water pipes. It can build up in the body over time and cause damage to the nervous system, which is why it's so dangerous for children.
That's definitely concerning.
Mm.
What about mercury? Where does that usually come from?
A major source of mercury is contaminated fish. Certain types of fish, especially large predatory fish like tuna and swordfish, can have high levels of mercury in them. So it's important to be aware of what kind of fish you're eating and how much.
So it's a balancing act. We need to make sure we're getting enough of the essential metals while also minimizing our exposure to the harmful ones.
That's right. And that's where things like environmental regulations and monitoring come in. It's important to be proactive about protecting ourselves from these toxic metals.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of metals and human health.
I agree. It's amazing how these elements we often don't even think about play such crucial roles in our bodies.
We've learned about how they're essential for life, how they can be both beneficial and harmful, and how scientists are using them to create incredible new medicines.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of everything. Our health is tied to the environment, the food we eat, and even the metals that make up our world.
If you've enjoyed this deep dive as much as we have, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, and leave us a comment below.
We always love hearing from you, and your feedback helps us create even better content.
And if you have any questions about metals and human health, or any other topic you'd like us to explore in the future, be sure to let us know in the comments.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the fascinating world of metals.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.